if everything is just focused on how do we do what we're already doing, but cheaper or faster, where does the evolution come into play? Where does the innovation happen? Where does the invention happen?
Hello and welcome. My name is George Matthew. Today we have Graham Skidmore, who is a former Rocket Mortgage executive turned entrepreneur, system architect, mystic who helps individuals and organizations reclaim their power through human-centered systems, ethical AI, and practical transformation. He's also the co-founder of Harmony Health Institute, an integrative human-centered model that shows how better decision-making, clarity, and performance all start with understanding the human operating system. Welcome, Graham, to the Complete AI Guide podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, George. I really appreciate it.
What does AI being ethical mean to you? Because I think in healthcare, that's one of the biggest themes out there at the moment.
Yeah, for me in general, I think for ethical AI, it's AI that is focused on enriching a person's agency and capabilities, also operating in the highest good for Earth, all of its inhabitants and its resources. So that's kind of, for me, I figure, if ethical AI is touching on all those components.
Right. And what does using AI to augment human agency and intelligence look like to you in that context?
Yeah, I think it's keeping it simple. It's helping people to make better decisions on their own.
Yeah.
Whether that be through, as opposed to replacing the reasoning, right? I think that's one of the big differences today. Is a lot of things let our AI tool do the reasoning for you, then you just go off and do. Well, I believe that no, we should be using AI to enrich our cognitive abilities, right? So the context behind the decision that's needed, that when you ask the same question as I do, is going to be totally different. Our measurements of success might be different, right? The environments that we're operating in are going to be different, right? So it's more of, how can I use technology to prompt me to figure out how to make the best decision based on my context, my specific goals, my situation, for me. And so, I guess you say, using decision trees as opposed to just being told what to do would be a simple comparison of it.
Right. And humans being in control of that decision-making process entirely, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, look, let technology do the grunt work, or let technology go out and find all of the information that you're going to look at and review to make a decision with. Let technology go out there and find some use cases or some best practices, some things that have gone right, some things that have gone wrong, right? So that you as a human can focus on the interpretation of the information and then the customization of that information and solution to your specific situation. To me, that's like the right way to get the best out of both worlds.
There is a school of thought that AI can actually restrict human evolution. And do you have a view on where that debate is going? AGI and what the rest of it? Because I think in healthcare, humans should own their own health outcomes.
Yeah, at some point in time, I'm waiting for people to stand up and go, "Hey, will you stop thinking so lowly of us as humans that and that we're such ignorant, dumb fools that we're just so easily replaceable, and that you can just put a glorified calculator in here and make us go away?" Because that's kind of how it feels when these companies are talking about how easy it is to replace the professionals, right? How easy it is, and I think that look, when things are super consistent, yes, it's easier to deploy AI to replace certain human aspects. But there's a very big difference between things are consistent. So now let me figure out how to replace the human aspects, and let me figure out how to replace the human versus, and this is also super critical in healthcare. Let's stop talking about how to replace doctors and how much more effective or efficient an AI is in its diagnoses. And let's start talking about how do we free up the doctor's time to be able to spend more time in patient care. And both answering questions and helping and spending the time with the patients who aren't getting the quality of life that they want, with the traditional, prescriptions, right? And let the doctors actually help on patients, and let's stop trying to jam everybody into this one size fits all thing. So yeah, my belief is that humanity is definitely going to go through a very difficult learning lesson with AI, but there's no way to do it besides going through it, right? And so, yeah, I absolutely believe that we can inhibit our evolution if we continue to rely on AI in the current ways that we do, which is essentially focus on efficiency and as opposed to effectiveness, which I think of as, bottom line versus top line. And how do we do the same stuff better and faster, which all of that is talking about how do I optimize inside of an existing box, as opposed to how do I continue to grow the box? How do I figure out how to operate outside of the box or when things don't fit into the box? And to me, that's where the humans come into play, right? Great, naturally inside of a box, and if you're going to play the game of optimization, technology is better suited to win that game than a human is. But not all of us humans fit inside that box. And I think that there's, a lot of us, when you think about different aspects of our life, more than not, none of us really fit inside of a one size fits all box, right? So in the areas that we do fit in there, great, let's let AI talk about it, but let's free up the time for humans to help us then, especially in healthcare, find that quality of life that we desire. Because there's plenty of people that are unhappy and aren't achieving the quality of life that they want, whether it be for mental, physical, or emotional reasons, right? So, but we got plenty of educated healthcare professionals that could be assisting us. So why is there a disconnect, right? Why are we talking about replacing versus additive and measuring our quality of results, not by how quickly or cheaply we can provide a diagnosis, but how we can make a reduction in the people that aren't living the quality of life that they want, right? Let's start measuring that, right? I mean, and that's a real big part, and that's a real big problem when it comes to the evolution of the human species, right? And when we start to give away our ability to think for ourselves, when we stop staying close to the problems and stop staying close to the work, where do these ideas to keep us moving forward come from?
So what are some of the key philosophies or approaches you follow when it comes to incorporating AI that differ from the mainstream thinking? I think you mentioned a few already.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, for me, it's starting to build around the human first, right? So it's like, so what do you want? What is it that is the competitive advantage to your business? Very rarely is that, in some cases it's a technical thing or a product, but when you think about what is it that really, and for small businesses, for example, customer service is an easy way for them to get a win over their larger competitors, right? And as a consumer, I don't think any of us have ever said, wow, that was the most amazing phone tree experience that I've ever had. It was, I'm now loyal to this organization because I didn't have to deal with anybody, right? Typically it's the opposite, right? Which is we couldn't get things met, et cetera, right? So instead of trying to replace that human element in customer service, right, it's saying, okay, look, I know that's my advantage, so I'm going to lean into that. I know that customer service is one of the places where I'm going to excel, so I'm going to actually keep my humans deployed there. All right, and so where else can I then also keep my humans deployed? And then based on that, what is left over that I can now use technology, that I can now outsource to technology, right? So it's, kind of flipping that script on its head and focusing on how do I leverage the humans and their subject matter expertise and use technology to enrich them and their abilities and allow them to focus on the impacts that matter, as opposed to how do I just use AI to save a couple of dollars. As especially like smaller, medium-sized businesses, so much of the working on the business and working in the business and being the business is the owner, which means that so many of the bottlenecks is also the owner. The tribal knowledge is the owner, or a few key people. And so a lot of times the dynamic is people have to go to the owner, right, to be able to figure out what to do in many cases.
Yeah.
Right. And the owner themselves, they have a framework of decisioning that they use. Right. So instead of so I think that focusing on replacing themselves with technology to make their tribal knowledge more accessible to their employees, to remove those bottlenecks, is also is a great use of technology. And so as opposed to it's replacing the owner versus replacing the employee, because the employee is the one that's typically doing a lot of the work. So let's help them to free up as much time as possible for them to deploy their subject matter expertise that's going to matter.
There is a theme sort of emerging in that in how you describe the use of AI in collaboration with humans, in that you amplify the human potential. And so do you see a world where this whole introduction of AI and AI tools and into mainstream way of working, would that lead to an amplification of what it is to be human, as becoming more profound and more refined?
Yeah, well, so I think you're starting to touch on, what the overarching real theme is of my work, right? Which is that human-centric future where we're able to use AI to amplify what it means to be human and to help us achieve our potential. When we start to talk about the human potential and being able to use AI to tap into that, and we start to think about, it being, or even being able to spend more time on our spirituality, different, and it's not a one size fits all, right? It can be different for all of us, which is the point, and which is what, the technology can facilitate, is that individualized experience, right? But, I think one of the best uses of our time is investing in humans and being able to give humans time back in their life to be able to invest in themselves, right? I mean, it's hardly, look, there's great technological advancement that's occurred, and we can look and say and give ourselves the propaganda of how much better off we are compared to our ancestors and things like that. But if you really break it down, that isn't necessarily the case, in all areas. It's not a blanket statement that things are better off. Right, the quality of life is not necessarily better for everybody today than what it was back in the day. And I think I would certainly hope that when we look around at collectively, we can say we want better for everybody than what we have today.
So, when shaping AI strategy, what would that look like in terms of being human centric and amplifying that human potential? What would that discourse or conversation look like?
So I think it starts with deciding, when we look at looking at our businesses, what is it that we want humans doing, right? And I think I started to mention this earlier, but it's really building around that. Whenever I both in my own corporate world and talking with others, the things that really hold organizations and individuals back from their potential is little things like they don't operate with the same set of information, the same facts, or the same measurements of success and goals, right? And usually that's the difference between the guy doing the work and their leader, or their leader's leader, and things like that.
Right.
As well as there tends to be a lack of alignment on how all of the different divisions and departments work together, support each other, and how they all roll up to support the larger cause of the organization. And so recognizing that, okay, look, if I believe that I have humans that are worth employing because of the skills that they bring, well, then how do I help them to become as effective as possible? And what are the things holding them back, right? And so I think it's really sitting down and watching your people work and recognizing, where don't they have access to the information that they need? Where is there a disconnect between the information that they're using to make decisions with versus their manager has access to make decisions with, right? Because a lot of times things just kind of go downhill, which is, all right, these are my marching orders to do, so that means these are your marching orders to do. But if we don't understand the why, well, then that inhibits our ability to translate when we find ourselves in certain situations, which creates those bottlenecks. So being able to using technology to do knowledge transfers, using technology to provide better troubleshooting from and this kind of goes into replicating aspects of the leader for their people, so that they can be more effective on the front lines in dealing with their customers, as well as the more that we don't operate in silos, and the more that we understand how our work affects other people, that will lead to different innovation and invention internally. Right, which is going to lead to more. Greater profit. In my belief, is that's going to lead to greater profitability than any cost-cutting measure.
Yeah. So essentially, your focus is more on the philosophy of AI rather than just the strategy or tactics.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. Yes, I think that's an important part. Is that for me, yeah, of course, there's tactics and strategies in my planning, but they all stem based on what my philosophies are, right? My philosophy is what determines my tactics. My philosophy is what determines what my strategies are. And part of that philosophy, too, is how all of the pieces need to be integrated and working together and complementing each other. And taking, so like right now, when we take a look at AI, a lot of times, hey, how do I save money versus, hey, if I was to take and make my company, if I was starting from scratch right now, what would that look like? Right. And then, and I think taking that first principles approach is something that's not happening enough.
Yeah, we talked about the philosophy of AI. We talked about strategy and tactics. And when you talk about philosophies, there are multiple philosophies, right? There's one is cost reduction, headcount reduction so that profitability goes up, use of more innovation and tooling so that you overhaul your systems and processes, and then you come in and say, hey, keep the humans at the center of everything and value and amplify the human potential in everything that we do. And I think it's a historic point in time where we never had to think about the existential threat to humanity as such. What is the other forces that actually operate on that? Because I think in the capitalistic mindset, it's always about profit, isn't it? And that is an overarching philosophy that will never go away when it comes to the human potential and the role of humans in economics.
Look, there's a reckoning that's going to need to occur. There's going to be a lot of tough conversations that corporations and governments and citizens need to have, because you're right. In a capitalist society, like, you can't get upset at a company for trying to increase its profitability through cost-cutting measures, right? I mean, that's like getting mad at a dog for barking. I mean, that's just part of being a dog, right? And so part of being a company in a capitalist environment is becoming as profitable as possible. And so we're either going to get to that phase because when we eventually get rid of so many jobs where we go, oh crap, we swung this pendulum too far, and now there's not enough money out there to actually pay for the goods and services. And so now we need to employ people so that we actually have people that can pay for our products, because there is eventually you have to have a certain percentage of people employed to be able to have to acquire users. So we're either going to learn that the hard way, or we're going to kind of ease our way into that and recognizing that. The other part of it is there needs to be a balance between capitalism and investing in humans as a species, and believing that that there is a responsibility, or a social responsibility that every organization has to the inhabitants of the planet, and recognize, and especially considering that they all built their products based on the work that these prior inhabitants provided. If it wasn't for the humans, they wouldn't have any products at all. Right. And so I think that, let's not forget about that. So there has to be some sort of social responsibility that these companies are held to. I don't think that a type of global welfare is the answer either.
It sounds like corporate social responsibility existed for many years, but now it includes AI and the use of technology as well. I mean, broadening the scope of CSR into the ethical use of technology, is that a potential direction?
Yeah, I think that, look, right now, I think that we need to start measuring the health of the planet as well, right, and the planet's resources. Right. I think we need to stop patting ourselves on the back for talking about how we can find all types of new ways to clean water, and start looking in the mirror and saying, why do we think that it's a greater demonstration of intelligence to find, new ways to make clean water, when it's a greater demonstration to stop burning up our resources before they're gone, right? And so the same way that we look at our economic factors, we need to start, we need to have our resource factors, and then we need to, and we're going to need to deploy things like that to govern these AI companies, because if everything is just about AI and the data centers and the energy usage that we're going to burn out, and people, we're going to find ourselves in like a giving tree situation. If anybody remembers that book as a child, where there was a tree in the backyard, and as a kid, right, he went out to the tree, and at first it was, he just, as a little kid, he had a swing that was on the tree in one of the branches, and then as he got older, right, like he cut down some branches, and then he made a canoe, and by the time the guy was an adult, all that he left was the tree was a stump that he could sit on, right, and the tree had nothing more to give, right? And so the planet's going to be the same thing for us if we're not careful about it, where we use up everything that's available to us, and all we've got left is a stump, and now we're left with some really difficult decisions, about what we've done. Humanity would be very well served to reconnect with its indigenous population, and understanding that the role of humans as stewardship, as well as, we need to be able to get back and figure out ways to measure and ensure that we're having a symbiotic relationship before things get out of control.
So what are those specific human capabilities that, AI will struggle to replicate?
I think that empathy, sympathy, compassion, kindness, stewardship, and why do those things matter? Because if you have those things, those are also the things that you use to develop product, right? Those are also the things that you use to develop workflows, to develop processes. So that when those emotions that I'm referring to aren't those are the sappy emotions and that's idealistic. No, if you really break it down, those are aspects of just caring about another human and wanting to improve another human's quality of life is a great way to have a never-ending pipeline of product and workflows, quite frankly.
Well, looking back at our conversation and where you headed in your journey, what's next for you?
My focus with the Harmony Health Institute is demonstrating how much more potential we all have when we are invested in properly, to lead us down that, to demonstrate why we should be investing in humans and why we should be focusing on a human-centric future versus an AI-centric future, right? Because if we believe that humans are already tapped out, and we've already achieved our potential, and the way we're going to get ahead is by, tapping into AI, well, then, that makes it a much harder discussion to talk about investing in humans and having a human-centric future. So, I don't need to talk about, what our potentials are. I just need to demonstrate it, right? Yeah, I guess that's really it. That's my focus, is demonstrating how we've lost sight, frankly, of humans and what it means to be humans, and we've totally narrowed down what is considered the normal human spectrum, and we need to widen that back out. And I think this is where AI can be a great tool, because a lot of what we focus on in healthcare and otherwise is how do we get everybody to fit into this one-size-fits-all box of normal.
And so is that a product or a framework that you're building? Is that a solution that one can buy in the market?
So at the moment, the Harmony Health Institute, both there is a technology product, but it is also a framework, right? There's a framework that's kind of redefining what does it mean to be a healthy human, because there's certainly biomarkers, but we all know biomarkers aren't everything. There's people that have got perfect tests and aren't living as long as they should be, aren't having the quality of life that they should be. I myself was one of them, right? I remember I was sitting on my doctor's and he's like, "Hey, you shouldn't look as good as you do and have these test results." And I was like, "Yeah, tell me about it. I know it. It's something that doesn't make sense here, right?" And so, so we've kind of created a complementary framework to the existing Western approach of identifying what it means to be healthy, just kind of based on our lived experiences, right? Do I have the energy to do what I need to do? Do I have the mobility to do what I need to do? Do I have the strength to do what I need to do, right? Do I feel like I have the support? Can I be myself and talk openly with my practitioners, et cetera, et cetera? Anyhow, and so, we build our technology around helping people to, understand. Our technology is really geared to help people better understand themselves, because one of our core beliefs is the better we understand ourselves, the better we can ask for the help that we need, right? And then the better we understand ourselves, the better we can also understand if what we're doing is making sense and actually helping us, or if we're just kind of or if there's a better use of our time, energy, and money, on our healing journey. So that's kind of how so while we're building a separate framework that's based on a scalable way to provide individualized care, we're relying on technology for those that want to have a bit more of a self-guided journey, so they can explore and then get the right questions that will help them to get the most out of their experiences with practitioners, and service providers.
Thank you, Graham. That was an inspiring conversation. What's the best way for our audience to reach out to you?
Well, if you want to, the Harmony Health Institute is the harmonyhealthinstitute.com, or Graham Skidmore, on LinkedIn are probably the two easiest ways to connect.
So that's all we have time for on the Complete AI Guide podcast. Thank you for joining us today. Please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Goodbye for now.